Most men, when faced with a mountain lion, would pray for a quick death. But Samson, he didn't even flinch. Without a sword, without a shield, he reached into the roar and tore that beast apart like a piece of old linen. It was a display of raw, terrifying power that should have signaled a new era of freedom for Israel. But here is the bitter irony. You can kill a lion in the wilderness, but you can't kill the fear in the hearts of your own people. Look at this. The man who could snap a lion's spine is now sitting quietly while his own brothers, 3,000 of them, approach him with ropes. They aren't here to crown him. They are here to sell him. The Philistines have oppressed them for so long that the Israelites would rather betray their only hero than risk a fight. Samson looks into the eyes of his kin and sees nothing but cowardice. He lets them bind him. He lets them tie the weapon of God in double thick, brand new cords. Because the only thing heavier than those ropes is the weight of being the only man left who's willing to stand up. The Philistines are screaming. They see the Lion of Israel in chains, and they think the war is over. They charge down the hill, smelling a pathetic victory. But then, the atmosphere changes. The wind stops. A low hum of divine electricity fills the air. Samson's eyes don't just open, they ignite. Those massive ropes, they don't just break, they melt like wax in a furnace. He reaches into the dirt and pulls out the only weapon a desperate man needs, the fresh jawbone of a donkey. It's grisly, it's primal, and it's about to become the most famous weapon in history. One man, one bone, 1,000 bodies. But when the dust settles, there is no music. No cheers from the 3,000 brothers who watched from the cliffs. There is only Samson, standing in a field of the dead, his throat screaming for water in a land that has forgotten how to give. He won the battle, but as he collapses into the sand, he realizes he's still the strongest man in the world, and he's still completely alone. How does a man with the strength of a god become a prisoner of his own heart? Why did a life that started with a lion end in a dark, silent cell? Don't go anywhere. Because the story of how Samson went from a miracle child to a blinded slave is a journey of fire, betrayal, and a love that was more dangerous than any army. We are going back to the beginning, to the secret vow that made him a king and the secret whisper that broke him. Stay with us. Great stories rarely begin with a roar. They usually begin with a whisper and a void. Long before the jawbone and the broken chains, there was a home in Zorah that tasted only of dust and disappointment. Manoah and his wife were good people, but they lived in a silence that every parent fears, the silence of a house without a child. In those days, being barren wasn't just a private grief, it was a public shame. But for this woman, the silence was about to be shattered by a messenger who didn't come from this world. The visitor didn't offer a choice. He offered a mandate. He told her she would conceive a son who would begin the deliverance of Israel. But there was a catch, a heavy one. This child was to be a Nazirite from the womb. No wine, no touching anything dead, and most importantly, no razor was ever to touch his head. To the world, it sounded like a blessing. To a mother, it sounded like her son was being drafted into a war before he even took his first breath. He wouldn't just be a boy, he would be a living sacrifice, a weapon owned by God. Imagine growing up as the miracle boy who is too dangerous to hug. As Samson grew, so did the spirit within him. But it felt less like a gift and more like a cage. He was the boy who could accidentally crush a friend's hand in a game of tag. He was the boy who smelled of the wild, whose hair grew into thick, heavy locks that marked him as different, weird, holy. While other boys were learning trades or finding first loves, Samson was wandering the lonely ridges of Mahanadan. He was a giant among peers who were terrified of his shadow. The only peace he found was in his mother's arms. I can see her now, running her fingers through that long, untouched hair, whispering to him while the village watched from a distance, "You are not a mistake. Samson, you are the prayer I whispered into the dirt for 20 years. You are a hero, even if it hurts to be one." But here is the thing about being a weapon of God. Weapons don't get to choose who they strike, and they certainly don't get to choose who they love. Samson was tired of being holy. He was tired of the rules. He was starving for a human connection that didn't involve fear. And that hunger, that desperate need to be seen as a man rather than a miracle, was about to lead him straight into the arms of the enemy. He thought he found love in the enemy's camp, a girl whose smile felt like a reprieve from his lonely destiny. But a wedding that should have been a bridge turned into a bloodbath. Coming up next, the riddle, the lion, and the fire. You're about to see how a single heartbreak ignited a war that would burn entire civilizations to the ground. Don't move, the fire is just getting started. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. For Samson, the road to ruin was paved with a single, devastating smile. He was tired of being the Holy One. He was tired of the lonely heights of Zorah. So, he descended. He went down to Timna, the heart of enemy territory. And there, amidst the music and the wine he wasn't allowed to drink, he saw her, a Philistine girl. She didn't look at him with the trembling fear of his own people. She looked at him, and she smiled. In that moment, Samson didn't see an enemy. He saw an escape. He told his parents, "Get her for me, for she pleases me well." It wasn't just lust. It was a hunger to be seen as a man, not a miracle. On the way to claim his bride, Samson encountered a lion. He slaughtered it with his bare hands in a display of raw, terrifying power. But even in victory, he was breaking his vows. He touched the dead and then he ate the honey from the carcass. Sweetness born from death, strength masking a rot. It was a metaphor for his entire life, and it became the spark for a riddle that would burn everything down. 7 days of feasting, a high-stakes bet. Samson, arrogant in his strength, challenged them out of the eater. Something to eat, out of the strong. Something sweet. Solve it in 7 days, or pay me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. He thought he was playing a game, but the Philistines don't play. They went to his bride. They didn't offer her a riddle. They offered her a threat. Tell us the answer, or we will burn you and your father's house to the ground. Samson could stand against 1,000 soldiers, but he couldn't stand against the tears of the only woman he ever let in. She nagged him. She wept. She told him he didn't love her. And on the 7th day, the strongest man in the world crumbled. He gave her his secret, and she gave it to the enemy. When they gave him the answer, Samson knew. He felt the cold sting of betrayal in his marrow. He went down to Ashkelon, slaughtered 30 men to pay his debt with their blood-stained clothes, and stormed back to his father's house. But when he returned for his wife, he found the ultimate insult. she had been given to his best man. That was the snap. The Spirit of the Lord didn't just bring strength, it brought a holy, unhinged fury. Samson caught 300 foxes. He tied them tail to tail, fastened burning torches between them, and turned them loose into the Philistine grain fields. He didn't just kill their soldiers, he incinerated their survival. He burned their vineyards, their olive groves, their entire economy. In retaliation, the Philistines did exactly what they threatened. They burned his wife and her father alive. Samson was no longer a judge. He was a force of nature. He slaughtered them hip and thigh, a total, bloody massacre, and retreated to a dark, lonely cave in the rock of Etam. He wanted love. He got ashes. He wanted a home. He got a war. For 20 years, Samson would rule Israel from the shadows of his own loneliness. He became a legend, a myth, a man who could carry the gates of a city on his back, but couldn't carry the weight of his own heart. But even legends have a breaking point. Coming up next, the entrance of the woman whose name is synonymous with betrayal. You think you know the story of Delilah? Think again. The most dangerous trap isn't made of steel, it's made of whispers. Don't go anywhere. The final act is about to begin. For 20 years, Samson was the shadow that loomed over the Philistine empire. He was more than a man. He was a one-man nuclear deterrent. As long as Samson breathed, the oppressors stayed their hand. He was the judge of Israel. But judge is a heavy title for a man who never felt like he belonged. For 2 decades, he stood at the center of every celebration, the guest of honor at every feast of victory. And yet, if you looked closely at those celebrations, you'd see a man standing on the edge of the firelight. People didn't talk to Samson, they talked about him. They looked at his hands and saw the lion he killed. They looked at his arms and saw the 1,000 men he slaughtered. They saw the legend. They never saw the man. This was his cage of silence, a prison where the walls were made of his own fame. He was reckless. He was bored. He was desperately searching for a moment of human heat in the coldness of his life. One night, he went to Gaza, the lion's den itself. The Philistines thought they finally had him. They locked the city gates and whispered, "Wait until morning, then we will kill him." But Samson didn't wait. At midnight, he didn't just wake up, he walked up to those gates. These weren't garden gates. These were massive, multi-ton structures designed to stop battering rams and armies. Samson didn't just break the locks. He grabbed the posts. He ripped the entire threshold out of the earthstone. Wood, iron, and all. And then, in the ultimate act of defiant loneliness, he didn't just drop them. He heaved them onto his shoulders and walked. He walked for miles, uphill, to the top of a peak facing Hebron. Why did he do it? Why carry a city's gates to a mountaintop? It wasn't just a display of strength. It was a scream into the void. It was Samson saying, "Look at what I can do. Look at the weight I can carry. Is this enough for you to love me? Is this enough for you to understand me?" But the only answer was the wind. He was the savior of a nation that used him like a shield but wouldn't touch him like a brother. He was a Nazirite, holy to God, but he felt like a freak to men. And after 20 years of carrying the weight of an entire people on his back, the giant was getting tired. His spirit was fraying. He was ready to give anything, even his life, for a single person who would look at him and not see a weapon. And that is when he met her. In the valley of Sorek, a woman whose name would become a curse, but whose face, to Samson, looked like the only home he had ever known. He was the strongest man alive, but he was about to meet his match, not in a warrior, but in a woman with a silver tongue and a heart made of ice. Coming up next, Delilah. The game of secrets, the 3 lies, and the moment the Lion of Israel finally broke. You think you know how he lost his strength? The truth is far more intimate and far more terrifying. Don't go anywhere. The betrayal is about to get personal. After 20 years of war, 20 years of carrying the gates of cities and the weight of a nation, Samson was soul tired. He was a man who had everything: strength, fame, power, and yet he had nothing. He was a hollow shell looking for a place to rest his head. And then he found Delilah. She wasn't just another woman. In the valley of Sorek, she was his sanctuary. When she looked at him, she didn't see a weapon of God or a judge of Israel. She saw a man, or at least, that's what she made him believe. For the first time in his life, Samson felt he didn't have to be a giant. He could just be. But while Samson was dreaming of a home, the Philistines were dreaming of a cage. The 5 lords of the Philistines approached Delilah with an offer no mercenary could refuse: 1,100 pieces of silver from each of them, a king's ransom. Their mission was simple: find out where his great strength lies. They didn't want to kill him, not yet. They wanted to break him. They wanted to see the Lion of Israel crawl. 3 times. They played this deadly game. 3 times. Delilah begged for his secret, and 3 times Samson lied. He told her to bind him with fresh bowstrings, then with new ropes, then to weave his sacred hair into a loom. You might ask, was he stupid? Could he not see the soldiers in the next room? But you have to understand the psychology of a lonely man. Samson wasn't stupid. He was addicted. He was addicted to the feeling of being wanted. He thought it was a game. He thought he could flirt with the edge of the abyss and never fall. He thought his strength was his own, something he could never lose. But then, Delilah played her final card. She used the one weapon that could pierce his divine armor: guilt. How can you say, "I love you," when your heart is not with me? She cried. Day after day, she pressed him. She nagged him. She made his life a misery of emotional blackmail. The Bible says his soul was vexed unto death. He was so tired of the secrets. He was so tired of the silence. He wanted to be known, even if being known meant being destroyed. So, he told her everything. He told her about the Nazirite vow. He told her about the razor that had never touched his head. He told her, "If I am shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man." The hair fell, and with it, the Spirit of God departed, not with a roar, but with a whisper. When Delilah screamed, "The Philistines are upon you," Samson, he woke up and thought, "I will go out as at other times." He didn't even know the Spirit had left him. He reached for a strength that wasn't there. He flexed muscles that were now just meat. The strongest man in the world was now just a man. The Philistines didn't just capture him. They took his pride. They took his glory. And then, with a hot iron, they took his eyes. The eyes that had looked at forbidden women. The eyes that had seen the glory of God. They were burned into darkness. They bound him in bronze fetters and dragged him to Gaza, the very city whose gates he had once carried on his back. No, he was their beast of burden, treading a grain mill in a dark, stinking prison. He is blind. He is broken. He is a laughingstock, grinding grain like an ox in the dark. But in the silence of that prison, something is happening. Something the Philistines forgot to check. The most powerful moment of this entire story, the moment of ultimate redemption and a sacrifice that will bring down a temple, is coming up next. You won't want to miss the final prayer of a man who found his sight only after he went blind. Don't turn away. The end is more explosive than you can imagine. There is no silence quite like the silence of a fallen hero. In the bowels of the Gaza prison, Samson lived in a world of perpetual midnight. He was the champion of Israel, reduced to a beast of burden. Every turn of that millstone was a reminder of his pride, his lust, and his broken promises. The Philistines loved to watch him. They would bring their children to throw stones at the blind monster. They would spit on the man who once carried their city gates on his shoulders. But in the darkness, something was happening that no one noticed. In the quiet of his shame, Samson wasn't just grinding grain, he was grinding away his ego. He was finally talking to the God he had ignored during his years of fame. And slowly, hair by hair, the sacred locks began to grow back. It was the great festival of Dagon. The Philistine lords wanted a show. They wanted to see their greatest enemy humiliated one last time. They called for Samson to make sport, for them to be their court jester, their blind toy. A small boy, a servant, led the giant by the hand into the center of the temple. Samson stood between the two massive central pillars that held up the entire roof. He could hear the 3,000 voices above him, mocking his name, mocking his God, laughing at his blindness. Samson felt the weight of the temple. He felt the weight of his own failures. And for the first time in his life, he didn't ask for a wife, or a riddle, or revenge for his own sake. He leaned his forehead against the stone and breathed a prayer that shook the foundations of heaven. O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once. O God. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea for mercy. He knew this strength wouldn't be for his glory, but for his end. He reached out his arms, one on each pillar. He braced himself, every muscle in his body corded like steel cables, his regrown hair flowing down his back like a lion's mane. With a roar that eclipsed the shouting of 3,000 people, Samson pushed. Let me die with the Philistines. The pillars snapped like dry twigs. The roof groaned, buckled, and then the world fell. In a single moment of absolute sacrifice, the temple of Dagon became a tomb. Samson killed more of his enemies in that one final breath than he had in his entire 20 years as a judge. He didn't escape the darkness. He brought the light of God's justice down into it. The story of Samson is often told as a cautionary tale of a man who lost his way. And it is. But it's also a story of a God who never lets go. Samson was the strongest man who ever lived. Yet he was defeated by his own need to be loved. He spent his life searching for a home in the arms of his enemies, only to find it in the ruins of a temple. He proves a profound truth. Strength without love is just armor for loneliness. You might feel like Samson today. Maybe you've made mistakes that feel like a prison. Maybe you feel like your hair has been cut and your strength is gone. But remember this. Samson's story didn't end in the dungeon. It ended in the Hall of Faith. Your greatest failure is not the end of your story. One sincere prayer, even if it's whispered in chains, is enough to bring the heavens down to your side. You are not your worst mistake. You are a prayer waiting to be answered. If Samson's journey moved you, if you've ever felt the weight of loneliness or the hope of a second chance, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late. Subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of the Bible's most flawed and fascinating heroes. Tell us in the comments, what is the pillar in your life that you need God's strength to move? Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.